This is Mr. Ishihara, the president of the Pokémon Company. In August 2022, he shared groundbreaking news about the future of the Pokémon trading card game. And my friends, the future is now. The Pokémon TCG, like most games, is subject to power creep. Power creep refers to the gradual unbalancing of a game, typically due to new installments and updates bringing more powerful options, rendering the old pieces underpowered and sometimes completely obsolete. The Pokémon TCG, especially when compared to another card game like Yu-Gi-Oh!, has historically not had many major issues with game balance, fixing their largest mistakes with much needed bans or even an early format rotation. What is a format rotation? I'm glad you asked. Only cards from the past few years are legal for the standard format, which is the tournament format for all official events. Every year or so, Pokémon will rotate about 4 older sets out, making room for the new sets in the next year. Of course, this means players will need to eventually buy new cards, but I don't really look at it as an evil part of the Pokémon money machine, as much as it is a balance precaution in the design of Pokémon cards. So that a card from 10 years ago doesn't threaten a broken interaction with a new card it was never meant to be paired with. This rotation of cards also avoids the need for power creep, since the new cards will have to be played as a product of eliminating the older cards via rotation. In my opinion, there have only been 2 major bumps in the road which Pokémon didn't issue a timely fix for, not including the mountain of balance problems with the original base set through Neo Genesis formats, which I give the designers a pass on since the game was brand new. The first of these major balance issues was Mewtwo EX and Double Colorless Energy in 2012. The Pokémon TCG went through a game design shift around this time to make the gameplay faster and easier, and the nail in the coffin was Mewtwo EX. Mewtwo EX became the best attacking Pokémon in the format, and it was also the best counter to itself. This was a problem due to Mewtwo being a basic Pokémon with more HP than most evolution Pokémon at the time, and only needing to attach a single energy card to use its main attack X-Ball, thanks to Double Colorless Energy. This caused a noticeable shift from Worlds 2011, where the top 32 decks all utilized evolution Pokémon and a variety of different strategies, to Worlds 2012, in which Mewtwo EX was included in 75% of the top 32 decks, and only 25% of the top 32 used any evolution Pokémon at all. The power creep and game imbalance between basic Pokémon EX and evolution Pokémon took years for the game designers to identify as a problem and eventually correct, with the early Sun and Moon sets which ushered in a new golden age of the Pokémon TCG. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more Pokémon TCG content, and check out my wonderful sponsors and affiliates linked down below. Use my coupon codes at pokecollect.com for a wide selection of sealed products, pre-orders for new releases, and unique mystery box items. At potownstore.com when shopping for Pokémon TCG Live code cards. At Dragon Shield Sleeves, my favorite card sleeves to use, and Into the AM apparel for comfortable and passionate clothing. If you have Pokémon TCG bulk lying around, start selling it with ease at tcgbulk.com. That modern golden age of the Pokémon TCG didn't last long, because the second of the 2 major blemishes on the otherwise fairly pristine track record of Pokémon TCG game balance was the combination of Tag Team Pokémon in the later Sun and Moon sets, immediately followed by V and VMAX Pokémon in the Sword and Shield era. Tag Team Pokémon GX mimicked the effect which Mewtwo EX had on the 2012 format. These Pokémon were all basics, had monstrous HP, and many had the most broken effects we'd ever seen from attacks. Like Gengar and Mimikyu's Horror House GX, which literally said the opponent couldn't play the game next turn, and Arceus, Dialga, and Palkia's Altered Creation GX, which cut the win condition of the game in half by making all Pokémon worth 1 extra prize card. One of the biggest issues here is that compared to Tag Team GX Pokémon, regular evolution Pokémon would take up more deck space and also take more time to evolve into their strongest forms, and even then would still be weaker than most of the tag teams. If you thought that it couldn't be worse than tag teams, I'd argue that you're wrong. because the mechanic that directly followed Tag Team GX was V and V Max Pokemon, which were overly statted and simplified Pokemon cards that blew most regular Pokemon out of the water. At least Tag Team Pokemon had several usable attacks each, and admittedly had some very interesting and unique effects. The same could not be said for the majority of V and V Max Pokemon, which made the Pokemon TCG unrecognizable and exceedingly bland to someone who had played the game in the 2 decades preceding V Max and Tag Teams. So the Sun and Moon era of the TCG was great until Tag Teams flooded the game, and the Sword and Shield sets were pretty miserable for anyone who remembered the good old days. Luckily, with Scarlet and Violet, we can hop into the Professor's Area Zero time machine and travel to the future that Mr. Ishihara promised us back in August 2022. In that announcement at Worlds 2022, we were shown a presentation from Mr. Nagashima, the lead designer at Creatures Inc., the company that designs the Pokemon trading card game. Nagashima told us that Stage 2 EX Pokemon would rival the VMAX Pokemon from Sword and Shield sets, and that comebacks would be an important theme within Scarlet and Violet. Nagashima also specified that evolution and diversity would be important aspects of the new Scarlet and Violet TCG sets. Hearing these promises from Creatures Inc. seemed too good to be true. The game designers were actually identifying the themes and card mechanics that players had been begging for the past few years. And Mr. Nagashima himself even specified that these new EX cards would rival that of the Pokemon V Max. Having this information come directly from the source was quite promising, but we'd have to wait and see if they could deliver on these significant claims. Between March and November 2023, we would receive 5 Scarlet and Violet TCG expansions in the West, 4 of them being full sets, and the 5th being the Generation 1 tribute set Scarlet and Violet 151. Creatures Inc. has a history of gradually implementing new mechanics and not going all out on the first couple sets of a new block. We've seen this as far back as Ruby and Sapphire EX in 2003, which was the original premiere of the lowercase EX mechanic. In this base set of the original EX block, the EX Pokemon were incredibly underwhelming, but in the next year of sets, we would receive format-defining EX Pokemon, like Blaziken EX from Team Magma vs Team Aqua, and Blastoise EX from Fire Red and Leaf Green. With that in mind, the Scarlet and Violet base set actually got off to a pretty explosive start, introducing both Miraidon EX and Gardevoir EX, which are still incredibly impressive cards even after 4 more Scarlet and Violet sets have been released. However, Scarlet and Violet base set didn't really offer much in the form of these comeback mechanics which we were promised, other than Defiance Band, which allows your Pokemon to deal 30 more damage if you're behind in prize cards. The second Scarlet and Violet expansion set, Paldea Evolved, delivered on the promise of comeback mechanics, with not 1, but 2 new impactful cards. The first of these was Iono, a supporter card that is almost an exact copy of beloved comeback cards from the past, Rocket's Admin from 2004 and N from 2011, but with the small twist of putting each player's hand on the bottom of their deck opposed to shuffling the hand into the deck. Iono immediately became a staple of the standard format upon release, and likely will stay that way until it rotates. The second card cashing in on the promise of comeback mechanics in Paldea Evolved was Reversal Energy, also a near reprint of an older card, Scramble Energy. In addition to these 2 cards, we've seen plenty of evidence that the designers are putting more value into evolving Pokemon, turning the game around from a losing position, and encouraging diversity of strategies and deck archetypes in the competitive metagame. Remember that time machine I mentioned from Area Zero? Well, it was only a matter of time until the Paradox Pokemon made their way into the trading card game. With the release of Paradox Rift on November 3rd, the Ancient and Future Pokemon made their debut with Pokemon like Roaring Moon and Screamtail from the past, and Iron Hands and Iron Valiant from the future. The excitement of Paradox Rift didn't stop there, as this set would also reprint Counter Catcher, an incredible item card that only benefits the player who is losing the game. Luxurious Cape is another card from this set with depth and decision making built into its core, since it gives one of your Pokemon 100 more HP at the cost of making that Pokemon worth an additional prize card. Even more from Paradox Rift, this set introduced 4 new technical machines, which are tool cards that give the attached Pokemon a new attack to use. All 4 of them are worth considering for your decks, but the Technical Machine Evolution is the most notable of them since it accelerates the evolution process for any type of deck. This might all sound amazing, but there was plenty of distaste in the competitive community about the future Pokemon cards Iron Valiant EX and Iron Hands EX. Iron Valiant EX has the ability Tachyon Bits, which can place 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. This isn't game-breaking by any means at face value, but when you consider that it's feasible to use up to 4 of these abilities a turn, players began fearing that turn 1 wins could occur because of this card, and that would dismantle all of the work Creatures Inc. has put in to encourage evolution, comeback mechanics, and overall more thoughtful games at the competitive level. The Doomsayers would digress on this topic of Iron Valiant EX, as the true detriment of Paradox Rift was claimed to be Iron Hands EX. You see, Iron Hands EX has an attack that allows it to take an extra prize card if specifically this attack knocks out a Pokemon, thus began the proclamation of the death of single prize Pokemon. Whether it was tunnel vision on an effect that triggered the PTSD of ADP, or simply the human condition of craving negativity and exaggeration, many engaged in this group think that Creatures Inc. had made a horrible miscalculation, and was essentially erasing all of the excellent steps they had made in the right direction with the Scarlet and Violet sets. The first major event with Paradox Rift legal for play was the Latin American International Championships on November 17th, 2023. Using the official Pokemon deck usage analysis from day 1 of the event, we can see that Gardevoir EX and Charizard EX decks took up over a third of the entire field together, with both of these decks heavily relying on evolution Pokemon and specifically Gardevoir using many single prize Pokemon as its main attackers. This surprised the people who stuck to their claims of Paradox Rift destroying the progress that had been made in favor of the Pokemon TCG's balance. If we turn our attention to the 3rd and 6th most played decks, these are the archetypes which would include Iron Hands EX seamlessly. So this new threat was definitely present in the field. Moving on to day 2 of the event, over 20% of the players who made it into day 2 were piloting Gardevoir EX decks, meaning not only was this archetype still popular, but it was also doing really well. Lost Zone Box, another deck archetype which was on the top prior to Paradox Rift and was rumored to be completely dead with the release of Iron Hands and Iron Valiant, not only had 10 spots in day 2, but would ultimately be piloted to 5th place by Brennan Kammerman. While I would love to tell you that this completely disproved the reign of terror that Iron Valiant and Iron Hands EX would have on the game, that would only be partially true. Although Lost Zone Box made it all the way to 5th place, and Gardevoir EX decks were massively successful, the 2nd place deck was an Iron Valiant EX archetype, and the champion of the whole event used a Miraidon EX deck, which included 1 copy of Iron Hands EX. Although a deck using Iron Hands EX did win the entire event, world-class players battling for tens of thousands of dollars in prize money chose to play decks like Gardevoir, Lost Zone, and Charizard, and to not much fault, as these decks were all successful. In fact, this massive tournament had incredibly diverse results, with 10 different archetypes just in the top 16 of this prestigious championship. Which leads me to say that the Pokemon TCG is currently in a fantastic competitive state. The Scarlet and Violet sets so far have left me confident in the Creatures Inc. designers, and I am not meeting every new card reveal with intense scrutiny, because for the first time since the early Sun and Moon sets, I'm having a wonderful time building decks, exploring strategies, and playing the Pokemon trading card game. Please feel free to leave your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below, and thanks for watching. I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.